All right. Hello, everybody, and good morning. Welcome to the session of From CFO to CEO Insights into Growth and Leadership. Hoping you guys have all grabbed either a warm or cold beverage, depending on which state you're in Australia. In this session, I am so excited to be joined by Andy Watt, who is joining me on the call. Today, he is the current CEO at Nearmap, which is a location intelligence company operating in Australia, New Zealand, the US, and Canada. So very happy to have him here. Andy will actually walk through some of his experiences of transitioning from a CFO to a CEO. And I mean, it's awesome. This guy has been under the leadership through a rebrand as well as an acquisition. So any of you attendees who are facing a similar landscape at your organizations, this session is for you. My name is Martha, and I'm the Senior Customer Marketing Manager here at Wheel. In case you aren't aware and you just joined halfway through that video, we are Australia's leading spend management platform, helping companies in all shapes and sizes get their spending under control. So just like any other awesome event, it cannot be possible without some epic sponsors. So I wanted to give a quick shout out to our friends at CFO Magazine, Translucent, and Fathom for making this event happen, and for you and I and Andy to be sitting in this session together today. Last but not least, like any of these sessions that are happening in today's CFO Summit, please, we would love these sessions to be interactive. So for any general comments that you may have, drop them in the chat button down below on your screen. But more importantly, we love to get your questions. Don't be shy, simply add them in the Q&A tab down below, and that way we can register them, collect them. And even if we don't have enough time at the end, we'll be able to respond back to you post today's summit. So without further ado, let's kick off this little fireside chat with the brilliant Andy Watt. So Andy, thank you very much for joining us today for the ANZ CFO Summit. To give some of the people context here, would you mind briefly going through how your career journey was prior to Nearmap?
Absolutely. Good morning, Martha. Good morning, everyone. Delighted to be here. For those of you who don't know, Martha and I do know each other from a former life, so just to be transparent with that one as well. But yeah, happy to share some of that story. So I'm looking forward to some very easy questions, by the way. If you can make them easy, that'd be great. Right. But yeah, look, my background's fairly standard in terms of I started off actually at the audit office back in the UK. You may notice from my accent that I'm not from this side of the world, from the UK originally, but I got my chartered accountancy qualification back at the National Audit Office in the UK, but then realised that audit probably wasn't going to be my future, so made a change and jumped into the commercial world and spent 6 years at Disney as a finance manager and loved my time there as part of the international TV distribution business, and then moved from there into online gaming and gambling, would you believe? So from Mickey Mouse to the slightly darker world of gaming and gambling. But it was a technology startup, and it was a company, Betfair, that was going through significant growth with a differentiated technology solution. And I loved the experience. I loved the people. I loved the pace that came with everything we're doing. We took that company through IPO back in the UK. And from there, really, I guess my career jumped to Australia. I was given the opportunity to become CFO for Tom Waterhouse over here in Australia, then moved on to this disruptive tech called Decimal. And from there, it was on to Nearmap, and I've been now at Nearmap for around 8.5 years. So it's been quite a while.
I just want to stop there and say, holy moly, what a ride from Disney Entertainment. I mean, even I didn't know the innate details of your career pathway outside of the Disney and obviously the betting world. But now being at Nearmap, another new industry, location intelligence, how did your career kind of evolve with Nearmap?
Yeah, so I came in as CFO. This was back in 2016, and we were an Australian-only organization. We did have a US arm, but it was early days. Yep. And we were selling one product to one region. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. We were on the ASX, so we were listed at that time. And my job really was to help grow and scale the organization, and we were looking for international exposure. So very much getting making sure that the understanding of our story was appreciated, not just by our customers, but by an investor base who didn't understand aerial imagery. And I'm sure there are a number of people on the call that don't really understand what
Mm.
location intelligence and aerial imagery is. I'll not go too deep on it, but really all we do is we provide very high resolution images, photographs of exactly flying planes, of properties on the ground, stitch them together into maps, very much like Google Maps if you want to use that analogy, and we sell that to businesses that help to solve their problems. That's the simplest way I can describe Nearmap. And so I came in as the CFO, and our job was to grow and expand our company, launch and be successful in North America, and then see where that journey took us. And that was the early stages. And of course, Martha, you've been part of that journey a little bit as well. We went through significant growth from an early stage, but it was about changing our business model, changing our investment model in support of what we could see as being a growing opportunity, and then driving that to successful conclusion. So starting off as CFO, and then over a period of time became the COO, and ultimately became CEO a couple of years ago.
And so that transition from, I'm going to call them the triple C's, the CFO,
Yeah.
the COO, just because try saying that 5 times fast. Can you kind of walk us through? I mean, from your experience, it sounds like you have had to navigate a lot of pivots and changes and developments in the organizations that you've been with. But specifically for this time at Nearmap, that jump from CFO and into CEO, can you walk us through how that transition was like?
Yeah, and so it was a conscious decision on my part, not surprisingly. But I had a conversation with the CEO, the former CEO, about 3 or 4 years ago, and we were talking about what's coming next for Nearmap, and he asked me the very direct question: "What do you want to be? What do you want to be when you grow up?" And I'll be honest, I hadn't really thought about it, which is just naive of me to some degree. But
Refreshing.
actually, having had the question asked of me, it was a great opportunity. He said, you could become, we talked it through, become the CFO, the career CFO. And that was something that appealed to me. And Nearmap was doing great things. And whether it was going to be Nearmap or elsewhere, I recognized that was a strong pathway. But actually, I had a curiosity, and I'd always had a very commercial role, even at Nearmap as the CFO, taking on a lot of the kind of customer activities and managing broader operations across the organization. And so I made a very conscious decision then to take a step out of being just the chief financial officer and took that COO role. So very much looked to broaden my experiences, and that again was with a view to future progression and direction as well. I wanted to take on more to become a better leader as a person as well. So taking on that operational lens and expanding that operational lens in the first instance, and then ultimately, heading towards CEO world, and that happened probably sooner than I expected, if I'm being honest. But I was delighted to have that pathway. And had I not taken that first step to be COO, I'm not sure I would have actually been given the opportunity to become the CEO. So I guess there was kind of just that, there was a little bit of circumstance that played to my favor. But again, there was a conscious decision about 3 or 4 years ago to really take a step change in my career and look for something different.
Yeah, and you hit the nail on the head there. If you hadn't made that decision to go into COO, like taking that leap of faith. And I feel like for anyone on the call here, heads of finance, directors, budding CFOs that are looking to pivot and change, were there any specific challenges that kind of popped up during this phase for you? And how did you
Yeah,
overcome?
and I think, as a finance professional, we're all very well versed in the numeric quantitative part of business practices. And that was obviously something that I built my career around and still use obviously to a very strong degree. But the transition really was to becoming a commercial leader, a business leader. So much more qualitative as well as quantitative. So applying I guess the financial rigor, but applying that in commercial outcomes and commercial decisions, spending very much more time in front of customers, which is something that I hadn't done as much previously. I had some
Mm.
engagement, but very much being on the front foot and helping to understand what were the problems, how could we best solve those problems, and then coming up with solutions for them. So really transitioning my external exposure to being much more customer led. And then from an internal perspective, obviously that transition from being the guy that looks after the numbers and reports the numbers every month, every quarter, every year end, to be something much more about the kind of the broader customer journey, the story within, and managing sales, which is a very different function, a very different set of people that you're interacting with as well. So that kind of behavioral shift that you have to bring to deal with other people in other functions, that was something I had to pick up pretty quickly.
I feel like how you're describing it is as if you were a chameleon, and having to report, like seriously
Right.
though, being the CFO and being the numbers guy, and then having to then speak to other departments and externally customers.
Yeah.
Usually finance is the department that's in the back corner in the shadows, and people are like, well, we don't go over there. But
Well, Yeah, occasionally, but yes, I take your point.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, but you are right. It was a shift in my who I was and how I acted, and that's not something you can just do overnight. I had to make very conscious decisions to be and try and be something different. I didn't want to move too far away from obviously my core strengths and behaviors and what makes me who I am, but I had to then translate that into new situations, new environments, both internally and externally, as you rightly call out, Martha. So just that shift in consciously every decision you make, thinking about what the implications are, not being just the CFO, the finance guy, making that decision based on a different set of parameters, different set of outcomes. It changes. It's a challenge. It's something you have to kind of, you're tuned and I've been doing this for 25 years to suddenly become
Yeah.
something slightly different. You have to reprogram yourself, and it takes a little bit of time to get used to it. But yeah, look, it's something I really enjoyed it actually. It was a big shift, but it's something that I was excited to do. And if you're excited by it, if you're not being forced into it, it's something that you're kind of proactive, you're in control of, you want to make work, then usually good outcomes come from that.
I feel like that attitude is the reason why you're in the position that you're in now, Andy. So, a testament to you, good sir. You actually made a good point of that you were still able to utilize some of your commercial background and learnings from being in a CFO capacity prior. What aspects actually of a CFO would have been most valuable to your role as CEO? Was there anything specific?
Yeah, and I think having a broad understanding of the business and all the levers, obviously, of what makes a business tick, it's so important. I'm not the first CFO to jump into a CEO role, and I won't be the last for very good reason. It's because as a CFO, as a finance professional, we have such a broad understanding of what goes on in an organization across all parts of it. You understand, of course, the quantitative aspects, but you understand what it is that the business is trying to do, what's working, what's not working, and applying that understanding and that knowledge to a bigger, broader set of business outcomes was something that I wouldn't say was easy, but it was something that I had such. I was coming from a strong base, shall we say, and that
Yeah.
really gave me a strong start to life. Obviously, there are other things that I had to then take on in the CEO role that I wasn't doing as the CFO. But because I had those relationships, because I had that understanding, I had the external kind of links as well, it made the transition so much simpler. So really that grounding and understanding business practices and outcomes really lent itself to then becoming a CEO and changing that leadership style.
Back to my comment of being a chameleon, so shedding the skin, is there actually traits of a CFO that you had to unlearn to get into the CEO kind of gig?
Yeah, you do. You're right. You have to consciously act differently. You're spot on there. So it's as a CFO, you're there to ensure financial governance on the one hand, but you're there to ensure that you're obviously managing the business and the metrics and the performance criteria that you're setting yourself are being managed to and all the things you expect to drive forwards. As the CEO, it's taking that much broader aspect, and of course, the financial implications of decision making are always going to be core to your continued decision making, but actually you've got to take on a broader lens of everything else that's coming into the equation as well. And so having that sort of broader lens of understanding what goes on in technology, how the sales organization is working, those customer opportunities,
Mm.
applying then the financial background to that was really important. So I think it was that level of being more curious and being more up and out and understanding what was going on from a customer lens that really then helped to drive forward. But you're right, you have to unlearn some behaviors. You have to not always just jump back into a spreadsheet. It's a safe place, I get that, but it's something that you have to kind of teach yourself to be much more than just that kind of numerical person.
And I think definitely the sense of curiosity and taking that first jump. I know that maybe the career opportunities for the people in this call are not necessarily available right now, but what you kind of talked about of meeting with customers or getting more closer to people in the sales team, you could probably do that realistically in your current positions right now, even though you're not in a CEO role. One would be able to expose themselves willingly just to learn a little bit more about the business and the departments in general.
Absolutely, I think it's critical. So look, I've something I've always been. Maybe you can see through my background from Disney to online gaming. I mean, the jump there, I was just curious to learn something new in a different environment, and I've always brought that kind of lens of testing myself to
Mm.
improve myself. And that was something that, again, as I sort of transitioned from the CFO to the CEO role, I was keen to do. You're right. There's great opportunity. I'm sure everyone on the call has opportunities in their organizations to take a more active role in other parts of the business. We've all got a day job, and that makes it,
Right.
sometimes challenging to do that. But being curious and actually spending that time and working those networks that you have internally, you don't have to be somebody that you're not. If you step too far outside of who you are, then you're going to come across as a bit of a phony and a bit of a fake. But
Yeah.
understanding how to do that in a way that works for you is really important. So that ability to work in on sales calls, that ability to work in with technology solutions, well, that ability to just take on a little bit more and understand more is so important. And I think learning in your role is critical, and that's what's going to stand. That's what stood me for great success, and I dare say will stand most people for success. If you can be curious, if you can look to learn every day as you come in, what else can I understand and learn today? It might not benefit you immediately, but to your point, Martha, over a period of time, that all builds up and it gives you opportunity in the future as well.
Yeah. I'm going to throw an interesting stat there. So 97% of businesses in Australia are small businesses. And you seeing Nearmap grow from its little startup and into a multi kind of international company as it is now, you've seen Nearmap go through significant transformations, particularly the acquisition from being on the ASX to
Yep.
then being acquired by private equity in 2022. Could you kind of tell us a little bit of how that acquisition journey was like for people who may be on the cusp of going into the same journey?
Happy to. So, like, Nearmap was, as I said, when I joined in 2016, we were a single product, single region, and it was a pretty simple company, to put it mildly. And we had a good product, but we weren't necessarily making the most of it. We put a lot of effort in the sort of next 3 or 4 years to really build our product capability and our international exposure. So, our North American business took off. But we actually recognized that we needed to disrupt our own business to really take advantage of the opportunities that the market was, that we felt the market had. And like this is the Nearmap story. It's not the same for everyone else, but we recognize that being on the ASX wasn't necessarily going to be the best place for us to take advantage of that growth opportunity, particularly as North America was becoming more of a growth engine for our organization. And so trying to get an investor base out of North America, I spent a lot of time as the CFO talking to investors in North America, and they understood tech so much more so than I felt that the Australian market did. And so actually part of that decision making was around how do we best set ourselves to be successful. And so we actively went out in 2022 to look at what opportunities we had to accelerate growth. And it wasn't necessarily to become private. That wasn't the overall goal, but it was really around how do we then leverage the growth opportunity in front of us. And ultimately, yes, it did lead us to private equity ownership. So delisting from the ASX and going to private equity. And that was a huge shift for us as an organization. As I say, we were prepared to disrupt our business in support of what we thought were great customer and business outcomes, but to go from to publicly listed to privately owned and a North American owned company at that was a big shift. So we had to go through diligence both ways. Obviously, the PE company wanted to get to know us, but we actually wanted to make sure we were comfortable with who that organization were as well. And so we spent a lot of time ourselves as a management team, as a leadership team, doing diligence on the other way around to ensure that the partnership that we were then building going forward was going to be the one that we wanted and was going to lead us to the success that we were looking for. So really challenging, but really rich experience that we went through as part of that equity buyout. And look, we were bought out at 1.2 billion. So you can see from 2016 to that point in 2022 that we were, the scale of Nearmap was significant, but that ability then as a private company to then transact more with M&A and do some other things that we've done subsequent really only possible under the PE lens. So it's been a challenge and there was high risk, but ultimately so far the reward has been positive as well.
I can't help but applaud the decision going into that, and totally, as I used to work at Nearmap, knowing how the investment conditions were being on the ASX and how that was kind of making us hit our ceiling, and you as well as the rest of the exec team had to make that evaluation of like, guys, this isn't really working for the trajectory that and the potential that we see our product developing into. So that was actually really cool for you guys to do your due diligence and evaluate. And particularly from a finance point of view, do you feel like your acumen in the finance actually played a big part in helping to evaluate?
Hugely, yeah. I mean, I mean, it was such a probably the most challenging, but probably the most rewarding experience that I've had in my career. And yes, the level of diligence that we went both ways, but it was heavily grounded in finance metrics and outcomes, right? I mean, it was really what do we see as a business opportunity and how are we going to leverage that and where does this take us? So as I wasn't the CFO during that process, but I was then sort of brought in almost back in as the sort of I guess the delegate CFO to help with that transition and manage that process. And it really was as I say, an incredible experience. So yeah, without that background, without that understanding, I don't think I would have certainly not got as much of the experience, and I think I added a lot to the process, obviously, as well, and ultimately got the CEO role at the end of it as part of it as well. But
Mm,
yeah, a hugely interesting financial model challenged us our thinking as from a financial perspective in terms of being on the ASX and what we were looking to do, and we were growth at all
yeah,
costs. And then it became a case of, well, how do we then sustain EBITDA as well as growing in the top line? And that changed the way that we thought about our business, required us to look at different financial models as part of that process. So
yeah.
really interesting process.
I like that you've dived into very specific metrics that would have changed based on company ownership alone. Like I feel these are some of the key takeaways that other people that may be facing a similar scenario would want to be aware about. And I've loved the examples that you've provided. So thank you for being quite specific and tactical, because there's a lot of small businesses, a lot of startups out there that are looking to take the next step, or even in growth phase and moving into a mature and larger multinational company. So it's very
Yeah, I
helpful.
think that changed from being, high growth into scale up into ultimately being PE owned. I mean, that was a huge shift for us. And as to your point, the metrics and the focus of it of you as a business changes as part of that. And you have to be aware of that, and you have to be proactive in dealing with that as well. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, being on the ASX, don't get me wrong, was an incredibly rewarding experience. But to your point, we reached a cap where we felt that we were prepared to invest in our business for growth, but a lot of the investment community wanted to wait to see where profitability was going to come and or where cash flow break even was going to come. Very traditional metrics that they were used to manage, I suppose, more traditional businesses. Whereas as a high growth tech business, we wanted to actually take a slightly different path. So that was part of the reason for the transition. And then in the private equity ownership, again, that point being that we could actually change our financial model in support of what we felt were the best outcomes for Nearmap over a period of time and for our customers as well. So it was a big shift because we had to start thinking differently and start reporting differently and start looking at different metrics in a different way. So yeah, not
Yeah.
an easy thing, but worth it.
Totally worth it. And it's kind of like I feel like I'm remiss in saying this, or I might be inaccurate, but it's like the whole captain of my fate, master of my soul kind of dealio, that you need to take the leap. You see what the environment conditions are. And so from your point of view,
Mm.
what advice would you have for other finance leaders who are kind of going through an acquisition, just as a
Yeah,
peer-to-peer kind of thing?
it's first and foremost diligence. It's be really aware of what you want to get out of the process, and then be disciplined in ensuring that that's the case. And it's as much about financial outcomes, but it's about people outcomes in all honesty. So if you don't find the right partnership, then it's going to be a bad relationship. It's a simple thing to say, but it's so important. When we were going through our diligence process, there was another group at the table, and they were offering more money, but frankly, we didn't get the same feel or didn't get the same positive kind of
Mm.
impression from them as to what they might be doing with Nearmap or what they might want out of Nearmap over a period of time. And so we ended up going with the company that we felt was best aligned to the values that Nearmap represented. And so that translated through the leadership group on the other side of the table, but obviously who we were as a leadership company as well. So really understanding what you're trying to get out of it and being really disciplined and focused on what those outcomes are, both financial and non-financial. That's the critical point I would make in
Ah,
part of this. So it's a really, it's not a one size fits all, and it's not a single lens that you have to apply here. You have to take it on board across all layers. So I think having a clear understanding of how that plays through, then understanding what you as an individual want to get out of it as well. It's something that you got to make sure that yes, I'm leading the company, but I've got my own aspirations and hopes as well. And how does my leadership style need to adapt as part of the new ownership structure? What else am I going to need to do? Am I capable of doing it? I mean, I had those existential moments where I thought, is this the thing I want to be doing, or is this a step
yeah.
in a direction that I'm not prepared to take? So again, being very honest with yourself about your own aspirations, your own direction, your own capabilities as part of that as well. So it's kind of that whole package that you've got to really contemplate as you're making these decisions.
And I feel like the current and consistent theme that I'm hearing from all your responses today is it is an all-rounded view and approach that you need to be taken. And so, I mean, as a CEO, and I know that some people have people that they look up to, or examples that they don't want to follow for their own personal career journeys. From your point of view and your point of view alone, even if you weren't from Nearmap, what do you feel would be standout qualities for a great leader to have?
Yeah, I think it's having a very strong EQ and IQ. You got to make sure that you're very in touch with relationships. And look, as finance people, we're not sometimes we don't get the best reputation for being the most sociable or people-led of individuals. But actually, that's not true. I find it very easy as a finance professional. We have so many relationships across organizations that you can leverage and use to your benefit. So having strong relationships, obviously, within the organization, leveraging those where you can. I was very fortunate that the former CEO, who's effectively my mentor now, was somebody that I could go to and talk to and bounce ideas off and get an understanding of whether it's from a business perspective or from a personal perspective. Being able to talk openly is something that I found incredibly powerful. So having that network or small network of people that you can trust and you can ask questions of. People always say it's lonely at the top. I don't think that's the case. It can be if you want it to be, but I don't think that's the case. I think there's a lot of people out there that you have built, networks through the course of your career that can really help you and are always prepared to help you, I've found as well. And leveraging that network is something I found incredibly beneficial in terms of my own decision making, but also helping to make decisions for Nearmap as well. So it's kind of really just understanding that environment and using those relationships that you built over a career to then to make those decisions going forward.
Yeah. And I mean, for key takeaways for people to come out of this session, you mentioned about having someone to bounce ideas or a mentor. Um, if you don't mind, like deeping into that a little bit more, how did you come across like your own mentor or mentee relationships? Any
Yeah, and it's something that I'm not one of these people who likes to walk into the room at a networking event and just walk up to a stranger and start that conversation. Yes,
it's a scary situation for
yeah,
some.
yeah. And like great if you can do it. It's just not my natural go-to place. I've always been curious, as I've said, as I've been building my career, and as I've found good leaders. And the reason you stay in a company is usually because you've got a good manager, right? That's a statement that's well known. So as I go through my career and I find good people that I enjoy working for, I've always tried to maintain a strong relationship with those people. And it's not just those people, but those people usually know good people themselves. And so you can have that extended network effect that then you can benefit from as well. So
Mm,
so I've still got mentors back in the UK that I regularly talk to because they were the people that kind of launched my career and gave me opportunity and things worked out well. So I still leverage that resource. But also here in Australia, as I built a network out here, as I say, very often it's not the person, the direct person. It's the person one extended from that I found it to be most beneficial. So actually being prepared to have that next conversation and looking to kind of expand that network is something that's worked well for me. So I've enjoyed it. I don't force it. If I force it, it doesn't work. It feels fake. So
yeah.
if it's something that's just a natural kind of evolution and course of business, then it works well for me.
I think it's coming down to simple human spirit. I'm in need of help. I know
Yeah.
you're the expert in this area. Like, can you please help me? And it's just coming from a genuine place as opposed to being like, let's make this a mentorship program and trying to put some bells and whistles on it where it's literally just a peer asking a peer for help at the end of the day.
People will help. It's the way it is, and people are more. I've found anyway, have been more than supportive in terms of giving advice and so on. So
Yeah.
yeah, I think you're right. As long as it's genuine, it's a real relationship. I think it works really well.
Yeah, awesome. On to our last few questions, if that's all right, Andy. You've been smashing it so far. Um, Going back and taking a step back and being more mindful and grateful about this entire process. If you could go back in time to the 2016 edition
Oh
of
wow.
Andy Watt at Nearmap when you first joined, what advice would you give to yourself?
Great question. Look, I think there's not a lot of change, but what I would probably say is I'd probably be more bold. I'd probably be more confident. It took me a couple of years to sort of feed myself into the role. And yes, we were making a lot of change in our organization, but I think having the confidence in your own ability, making sure you got a strong team, obviously, it took a little
Mm,
while for me to kind of work through some of the team aspects of the role as well. But being confident and I recognize there were some tentative decisions that I made back in the earlier days that I would probably have changed or moved more quickly on. So again, you don't need to do something unnatural. You don't need to prove yourself on day one. That's not what it's about. But it's about being, if you've got a clear line of sight of what you think you need to do, but just getting on with it, having that bias to action, I think is probably the most kind of relevant statement I'd make is that don't be afraid to make those decisions and move forwards. you back yourself with your experience and your knowledge, and usually you get good outcomes. But yeah, biased action in the earlier days, that probably would have short-circuited a couple of the challenges that we're facing as we're growing as an organization.
Yeah. Love the confidence. Love the backing of yourself. I feel that sometimes, particularly, there are people that say for going for a job and they feel like they need to hit 7 out of the 10 skills that's been advertised, for example. Whereas if you have like a wholehearted kind of skill set that you could go with a little bit less of the skills there, but be the willingness to learn and the willingness to jump ahead could actually help aid your growth into new roles. So that's actually a really good segue for my next question, which would be, typically people in finance, they may feel that, oh man, I am pigeonholed in this function. Are there any career opportunities that are outside? Like if I wanted to go out, like you've managed to go into a CEO role. So what advice would you give to those specifically in the finance function looking to branch out of it?
Yeah, like again, I'll go back to the comments earlier about being curious, genuinely be genuine, but be curious. Make sure that you have that you're driven to find out more. We all like to kind of do the day job is the day job, and we get all of that. But there's always opportunity, no matter what organization you work for, to kind of expand outside of just what it is you're doing. Whether it's getting involved in a project that's slightly left of center for you, or just spending time sitting in sales calls. I spent a lot of time listening to gong calls, so sales calls, just to familiarize myself with who the customers were and what were the problems they were trying to solve. So it didn't necessarily help me on day one or day two, but it just helped to kind of bring a sense of perspective broader than just the broader finance world. So there's always going to be opportunities, and hopefully you've got good leaders and managers in your organization that will help and support you in that. But there's a lot you can do yourself, as I say, and just inviting yourself to town halls for other functions or whatever that might be, that just helps you to understand more and provide context. If you can provide context, then you stand in such a strong position to then leverage that and be
Won
an
half the
asset, a
battle.
bigger asset to the business. And so, yeah, being proactive in that, yeah, get help where you can, but being proactive with it, I'm sure there's ample opportunity for people to do that.
Unreal, Andy. I got to say, that was one of the most refreshing takes I've ever experienced from a CEO, actually talking truth of tactically what you can do realistically with your career, and that you don't achieve it by yourself. Usually a lot of people say that it takes a village and having mentorship and going and forming these awesome relationships with other departments. It might sound simple to some, but I highly doubt that people take that step to actually do it. So now, instead of looking back, looking forward, so Nearmap, what excites you for the future of your organization?
Yeah, look, we're 2 years into our private equity growth journey, and things have gone incredibly well. So we're in a very strong position. So we are still in 4 geographies. We've made a couple of acquisitions recently as well, which have gone very well. But it really is now about plotting the next 4 years. We had the board came into town 2 weeks ago from the US into Sydney, and we set a strategy, and it's all about the next 4 years of growth. So with private equity, there's always a time aspect to how long they're going to hold you for, but they've been pleased with progress to date. So really for us, it's about how do we take on more products, look at more geographies as well, and really continue the growth expansion. This is a marketplace that's needs leadership, and we believe we can provide that leadership. So I'm excited about what that means for Nearmap. I'm excited about what that means for me. I'm very realistic in terms of where we are today and where I am today. I've got a lot to learn as well, and I'm looking forward to where I can take this company, but more importantly about what I can learn along the way as well. And there'll be things I don't know as well, but the great thing about private equity I've found is that there's a very strong network that you get plugged into as well that will help you then take that next step in your career or the company's evolution from being where we are today to being where we can be in the future. And so, yeah, we're excited because we're really just getting going now. We spent 2 years kind of getting things moving, and it's gone faster than we expected. And now it's about how do we supercharge that and go even further and faster. So, yeah, it's going to be a hell of a ride, but yeah, looking forward to it.
Look, as an ex-Nearmapper and a bystander, I am enamored and also very impressed by what you guys have been able to achieve from the sidelines, and outsider looking in. So it does look very exciting, and the ride is going to be undulating, no doubt. Thank you so much for sharing your insights, Andy, for taking the time to walk through specific examples like I've learned a lot about you in this session, and I'm sure hopefully the others on this call have as well. We are at that point in time where we are opening the Q&A. So again, as I said at the beginning, guys, please do not be shy. Submit those questions in the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen, and we'll get them answered for you. Toot sweet. So we'll leave a couple of minutes here for you to do so. Any questions? Okay. All right, in the chat, but we will do that. So great session, Andy. Do you see yourself remaining in a CEO role, or would you consider moving back into a CFO role in the future?
Yeah, great question, David. It's something I have considered regularly. I actually would move back to CFO. I'll be happy to move back to CFO role at some point. That said, I'm loving the broader exposure that I have into the business, and so it's something that I'm happy to. In fact, I'd love to, if I was to leave Nearmap tomorrow for whatever reason. I think my first protocol would be to take on another CEO role. I think I found that incredibly rewarding and exciting. But at some point, actually, I would like to go back to being a CFO, believe it or not. There's a part of me that's kind of going full circle on some of this, because I think I would love to take the experiences that I've learned as a CEO, and I think I'd be a much more effective CFO, if that makes any sense. So it's something that I'd absolutely welcome. But yeah, hopefully not a decision I'm going to make anytime soon, although you never know in this world. But certainly I'm open to all opportunities. So it would be an interesting next decision. Yeah.
Thanks, Andy, and thanks, David, for that question. Any others before we wrap up? Give a few more seconds here. Okay, so that is basically it. Oh, we've got one last minute. Yep. Congrats, Andy. This is from Birend. I'm hoping I've pronounced that correctly. How do you manage your inbox and organize your day to balance to the top strategic, I guess?
Yeah, look, it's inevitably you're going to have there's a lot on your plate, particularly being multi-region, and obviously my days start very early now. I tend to have a lot of calls to the US with customers, with the growing team over there. So I tend to have a sort of 7 till 12 is kind of my US time, and then 12 till 4 is my Australian time, and then kind of then get on to the what I need to do after that. Having a strong leadership team is incredibly important, because all decisions need not come from me. In fact, it's best that they don't, frankly. So being very clear on getting a strong leadership team, being very clear on what their roles and responsibilities are, working well as those teams is important. And being disciplined with your time. It's one of those obvious statements to make, I know, but it's hard to do, is making sure that you're managing your time well, managing your meeting schedules well. We can all get sucked into meetings all day if it comes to it, but being very disciplined in what's important, what's not important, what meetings and emails do I need to attend and deal with, and what are other people more than capable of doing. There's sometimes a safety net of always sort of escalating everything up, but actually being very clear on what's appropriate and what your ultimate decision making is really important. So there's no perfect answer. My inbox is probably like most of the people around on the call, but yeah, just being focused and disciplined and being very conscious of that. And being prepared to say no is, again, another simple thing, is that it doesn't always have to land on my desk to get a rubber stamp, if you know what I mean.
Thanks, Andy. And I love that once one question gets submitted, they come rolling through. So we've got another one here. Thank you, Andy. As a person in a pigeonhole finance function, other than internal career opportunities, are there any specific additional education that you have that has helped with your career?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, if it's something that within the company it's hard for you to kind of stretch out of your role or your area of responsibility, what else can you do? Believe it or not, I actually did a company secretary course once, just because I was interested in sort of taking a broader role. I was kind of like, what else can I do to expose myself to more external factors that were in the organization. A lot of the learning that I did, though, was, I guess, I wouldn't call it finance led. It was more industry led, because I was interested in understanding other things that were going on in the marketplace, to which I could then apply the finance lens. So I was keen to attend industry events, and I would happily pay for some of those on my own bat if that's what it came to. Usually, fortunately, the company was always supportive of helping with that. So finding ways through your network, or just through your own means of broadening your experience, I found incredibly positive. And sometimes, yes, you have to do that on your own bat, off your own bat, and that's, part of what the growing up is. But again, if you're curious enough, if you're interested enough, then you'll find ways to make that work. So I wouldn't say there's any one thing specifically, but just whatever it is that gets you interested and gets you out of bed in the morning, that's kind of what I usually kind of end up driving towards.
Nice. And conscious of time, we'll do one more question before we wrap things up. So, one question here to you, Andy. Curious about your decision making as a CFO or CEO on what technology to deploy to support your business productivity gains to expedite goal achievements. Have you got
Yeah, yeah, I think as our company grew, maybe just again sticking with the Nearmap example, as our company grew, obviously the amount of data that we were ingesting and using for decision making grew exponentially. And the Excel spreadsheet runs out of tabs pretty quickly, right? You got to find your systemic approach to solutions. And part of what's, we're only 450 people as an organization, but as I say, our valuation's way in excess of $1 billion. We don't add more people as we add more customers. That's kind of, we got to that point where technology has to provide the solution to the operational scaling of an organization. So that's a big decision as a CFO often, and a CEO, but certainly my role as CFO was, if you're putting a dollar into the business, most people say you got to put that dollar in support of revenue generating activities. Well, actually, the decisions we made back in 2016 to 2018 were about revenue supporting activities were as important as revenue generating. And so putting the focus on the systemic components of revenue operations, which is a huge part of our business here, and the scaling of that and the tools that we then use to manage the commercial decision-making engine. We were fortunate, if you want to call it that, to have the resource that we could do that. But it was every dollar that we put into that space has paid itself back in multiple terms because it's enabled us to scale. Yes, you've still got to have the right sales engine. Yes, you've still got to have all the things that you expect from a market-facing perspective. But without the infrastructure to scale, you're going to become the limiting factor to your own growth. So we always had this repeatable, scalable mantra at Nearmap. It was all about how do we operationally scale effectively, and it's served us incredibly well. So I can't overplay that. That is a huge decision. You're always going to have the tension in an organization about where you invest your money and what the best returns are. But from our experience here at Nearmap, I can't overemphasize how important that scaling effectiveness and efficiency has been for us.
amazing? And I can't emphasize enough of how prominent it became that we needed solutions to scale, even in the marketing team back when I
Okay.
used to work at Nearmap, is just making sure that it was able to take the capacity of our growing customer base. So, Andy, on that note, I do realize there are a couple more questions coming through, but we will answer them post the summit day and get back to you. But thank you so much for your time, Andy. That was awesome. Hope you had some fun. I wanted to drop a little note before we wrap up that the next session that we've got lined up for the ANZ CFO Summit is with myself and Chloe Dung, who is our Director of Finance at Wheel. And that session will be about more than numbers, how finance shapes company culture. So you won't want to miss that one out if you don't want to be pigeonholed in the finance teams that we've heard today. So thank you everyone for your time. Thank you, Andy, once again. And everyone have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.